Sex is the life force energy that runs through us all. Can you use sexual energy for your spiritual evolution? Or perhaps for emotional healing? Is it even possible? Clinical sexologist Dr. Martha Tara Lee will explore all these and more on Eros Evolution on Home Times Radio.
Hello, and welcome to Eros Evolution. This is where sexuality and spirituality meets. My name is Martha. I'm a clinical sexologist from Eros Coaching. That's EROS coaching.com. So I had some connection issues just now, and so today's show is slightly delayed. Yeah, this happens sometimes because our show is live. So in today's show, I'll be talking about my new book, and the title is From Princess to Queen, and the subtitle is Heartbreaks, Heartgasms, and Everything in Between. And this would be my third book. And so in today's show, I'll be talking a little bit about the book and synthesizing, summarizing some of the insights that you can get. So in this third book that I'll be launching hopefully next month, I share my views on, of course, sex and sexuality. And being the first sexologist with a doctorate in human sexuality in Singapore, I have had a difficult 7 years. It's been challenging, I would say, not difficult, challenging. There were definitely times in which my work has been very rewarding and very fulfilling. In fact, I was just telling my mom last night how fulfilling my work is. So in the book, I share how I survived heartbreaks and experienced heartgasm through this journey of 7 years. And actually, it's way more than 7 years. A lot of the 7 years of my being a sexologist is compressed and summarized, condensed into it. This book is not really just a personal and professional journey of myself as a woman, reclaiming my femininity and stepping into my power as a woman. It really also included chapters, it's weaved into the chapters really, of different nuggets of information and advice that I have for readers. So one of the things that was articulated by some of my friends who reviewed my books is they felt that there's this thin line between how I review myself and my personal life to when it becomes narcissistic and it's just like TMI, too much information. And I noticed that this only came from the men, and but the women, none of them said that. Even my friends who are more intellectual or rational, more pragmatic, they didn't feel this coming from the book. And I've read many books, like, thousands of books in my life, and I've read books that are more like a chick flick kind of a book, where I feel a lot of what goes on in the head of the main character of the book. They do tend to go on and on and on. But those are fiction, right? But mine is kind of a semi-realistic kind of a book. And I felt I was trying very hard to articulate through my own life the point of what I'm trying to share. So there are 12 chapters in this book, and they go from talking about my first my masturbation story, which is a very significant entrance for me into the start of my sexuality, And then goes on to my body image story and how I was plump and had a lot of acne and had terrible hair, had geeky glasses growing up, and how I was bullied because of the way I looked, and how this affected my sexuality. So there are interwoven this theme of personal story followed by advice. And I call these little advice, I call them let's get practical sections. At the start of every chapter, there's a little princess story, because growing up, of course, being influenced by Walt Disney and princess tales, that very much dreamed of meeting my Prince Charming, having a happily ever after, and not really understanding the difference between princess and queen, and so the title of the book, From Princess to Queen. What actually happened was I thought, having published 2 books, the first one being Love, Sex, and Everything in Between, and in the first book, it's really a compilation of different essays and work that I have done over the last, I would say, 2-3 years at that point. And then 2 years ago, I published my second book called Orgasmic Yoga, and the subtitle is Masturbation Meditation and Everything in Between. And it talked about the 7 components to having bigger, longer, stronger orgasms, and also how you can change up your masturbation practice. And then the book also then went on to 30 different practices that people with penises and people with vaginas could experiment with. Yeah, so this book I thought would be a compilation of different stories relating to my journey as a sexologist. So I had originally wanted to, because this is the 7th year, I thought play with words, and wanted to title the book I Survived the 7th Year Itch. And so this was the original title. And this was earlier in this year. I did a little crowdfunding, raised some money, and felt that there was a very real deadline of June. And what happened was, as the months went on, I just couldn't find myself wanting and not feeling excited about writing this book. And once I started to dig deeper into myself and decided to pull something inside me that was much more vulnerable and real, this theme came forward of From Princess to Queen. And so that was much more personal to me. And then the writing started. And the writing didn't actually take a long time. I noticed like different chapters took different kinds of energy from me than others. And some of them were already, I would say, partially written over the years. And so it was pulling together different things that I wanted to put into this book as something that would be really useful for readers out there. And so when I started to do that, the book just organically started to evolve. I realized that I wanted to put in a lot more than I had originally planned, and because I wanted to be such a practical, useful, yet personal book, kind of a mix of a few different things. Because of that, I decided to also put in other things, such as the chapter on long-term relationships, and one of them being happily ever after not, highlighting the challenges of long-term relationships. Yeah, so I'll go more into the book after this break.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. Om Times Radio. IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of Om Times Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of Om Times. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Hi, I'm Kelly Fox, host and astrologer of The Astrology Show. Each week, I'll give you access to the current transits, which are a valuable tool that provide astrological information to help unlock the potential each of us has. Understanding the stars can help steer us in the right direction to make better informed choices. So if you're wondering what's going to happen in your week ahead, be sure to tune in to The Astrology Show for guidance, Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time.
Every 2 minutes, an American is sexually assaulted. The majority of victims know their attacker. It could be your friend, your neighbor, or someone you met at a party. If you said no, it's rape, and it's a crime. This is Christina Ricci with RAIN. Call the National Sexual Assault Hotline today at 1-800-656-HOPE or visit RAIN.org. That's RAINN.org.
Brought to you by RAIN and this station.
And you are listening to Eros Evolution on the Om Times Radio Network. You can share this show with your friends by going to the link omtimes.com/mobile. With this link, you'll be able to listen to the show without needing to download any app. That's really cool. And this is Martha, and today we're talking about my book, From Princess to Queen, and the book has 13 chapters, and they cover different topics such as masturbation, body image, first-time sex, heartbreaks, sex conversations, sex education, sex problems, long-term relationships, burnout, sex and illness, bliss, everything else, crowning moment. So these are just the chapter headlines. I suppose they don't really make sense until you go into it. And these chapter headlines are pretty factual. Yet if you go into it, you will see the opening of each chapter. There's a little princess story followed by a personal story, and then leading into the personal story in the same chapter would be a few pages of advice that would be more practical to readers. For instance, when it comes to masturbation, how to masturbate. For body image, how to learn how to become more comfortable with your body, and so on and so forth. So even like first-time sex, if someone has never had sex before, how would you be able to have sex for the first time that is less painful? This is coming from the perspective of someone with a vagina, myself. So let's go into Heartbreaks a little bit, and because that's the subtitle of the book, Heartbreaks, Heartgasms, and everything in between. And in Heartbreaks, I actually review for the first time, and that was a very difficult chapter to write for the first time about my past relationships. I've talked about it. I have not been forthcoming in writing about it, and this would be the first time I'm writing about the two biggest relationships of my life, which is my two previous marriages, and what actually transpired. And because I'm very mindful that I'm trying to share with the point of trying to be useful, so it's revealing, but yet at the same time I want to be useful. So I didn't really want to belabor the point by painting myself as a victim or even blaming my past partners, which is not what I want. So I decided to condense my whole personal story into personal sex, personal relationship story into that one chapter. And it is definitely very vulnerable. However, I felt that there is a point in sharing that. Okay, so let me just summarize a little bit what actually happened. So I in that chapter, I talk about the similarities in my two marriages and what I learned, and I'm just going to do a quick summary for you guys. So in the similarities of my two marriages, I noticed that I, being a healer and being an empath and being very sensitive to people, I wanted to help these men, and that of course is a big mistake, which I didn't learn until later because I was just not experienced with relationships and navigating them and choosing the right partner. And so I wrote there that I saw the wounded child within, and I bought into their potential. I wanted to help, and I just bought into this illusion. So I know now that that nobody can heal someone without their desire to grow and to help themselves. Both my partners, they made several promises that they would fulfill, but they never did. And since I personally don't make promises that I couldn't fulfill, I just simply assumed that people don't do these things, and I assumed the best in people, and I trusted them. I believed that they would fulfill their promises, and they never did. And so once the bubble burst, and I realized that I was married to this kind of person, I just wanted out. And I also became victim to the good girl syndrome of believing that if I controlled my emotions and I was patient, that things would just turn out well, and that this is illusion of the happily ever after. And I learned that this mentality of wanting to be rescued it really wasn't serving me, because I wasn't seeing things as they were. And that was very important, to have that element of realism in your relationships as well. And both my partners were conflict adverse. And this was, again, something that I needed time to grow into, understanding that different people have different personalities and also different conflict styles. And because both of them were conflict adverse, it was really difficult to address anything in the relationship, anything at all, small, big. They would stonewall me. They would be very, they would listen without any real desire to address it, without any desire to, basically avoid, right? So when it comes to avoiding, they would make promises when pushed to it, yet they would not do anything. So these tactics that I thought would be helpful, of yelling, screaming, crying, talking, repeating myself, pleading with them, giving them time and space, simply didn't work. And it didn't work because these partners that I had, they were just not interested to address those issues. And this was also the way that they address other challenges in their lives. And I needed to grow up, and I needed to learn that this was not serving anybody, especially myself. Both my partners didn't care for my friends. They didn't have their own friends. They didn't make an effort to get to know my friends. They didn't want friends. And both of them actually were very happy with being home people. They were very happy with shutting out the rest of the world. And the young me actually thought that this was romantic, this whole coming together as a couple and going into your own little cocoon. I thought that was very romantic. And what turned out happening in a long-term relationship is that I started to lose my sense of myself. And I'm not blaming them. I really don't want to make it come across that I'm blaming my past husbands. I really want to express that I just didn't know better because I was young, and I didn't know what was so-called common in relationships, and I didn't know what healthy relationships look like. So I don't want to come across as I'm shaming or blaming my ex-husbands, because I have learned so much about myself and about relationships, and I wouldn't be the person that I am today, or the coach that I am today, without having lived these lessons. What I am sharing here is just little excerpts from my book and what I've learned. Both of them were not good with money, and they actually left me with no money. And I don't mean that they stole money from me, because they were not good with money. I ended up taking my money and helping them, helping our household or the expenses that we had, even helping them with what they needed. What actually I learned was that I didn't value myself or money enough. I didn't take care of the money that I was earning. I didn't take responsibility for myself. And I prioritized my love and my relationship over money. And by giving them my money and not spending my money wisely, what was happening was it was speaking volumes about my lack of self-love and valuing of myself. And so this was something that I have learned along the way, and this was really invaluable, because our relationship with sex affects our sex life, our relationship with money affects our abundance, it affects our prosperity, and it affects our future, it affects our retirement, and it's really important to think about it and to work on our relationship with money also. As much as I want to be loving and compassionate and focus on having a healthy and beautiful relationship, I forgot that I also needed in the healthy relationship to be taking care of myself, and this included my finances, and not just give it away blindly and never really have the financial issues addressed, which is both my ex-husbands were not good with money and didn't take responsibility for themselves, for their money, and I was just not taking care of myself. The next thing was that both of them were okay with leaving me to clear up their mess. So there's this element of perhaps entitlement, of just taking from people, and as much as there are people who take, there are also people who give. So I'm not blaming them. I'm just saying that I didn't see all these things, that being a loving and giving person leaves me very susceptible to people who just take and take and take. And they left me. I left them. They left me. I made the decision to leave both of them. However, as they left me to clear up the mess. By that I meant both men actually abandoned me. We had an agreement to separate, or we had an agreement to file for divorce, and because of the time that he needed to file for it, they basically stopped responding to my attempts to contact them, both of them being overseas, and then at that point I had to clear up the paperwork. I had to pay for the divorce, and they went scot-free. It felt like I had to clear up the mess myself, and so this very real sense of abandonment had to be addressed. So I had to heal all parts of myself so that I can have hope in my life, so that I can go on to do the work that I do, which is to help people. So I guess with all the things that actually happened to me in my personal life, there was a lot of shame, there was a lot of guilt, yet there was always this glimmer of what is the good that I can get from this? What can I learn about myself? How can I be a better person? How can I choose not to be jaded? and not to become such a bitter person that I become really impossible to live with. And I always was holding out for love as I grew, and wanted to find somebody who really got me and really was deserving of the love. And so, this is a part about heartbreaks. I hope that I'm giving you enough to interest you to get the book, because there's so much more in the book that I'm not sharing, and just delving directly, immediately into heartbreak. So we'll come back and go into the next part, which is
Free Your Mind with Om Times Radio, IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment, a philanthropic organization. Their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
What's up? This is Brad and Mike from Lincoln Park for Life Beat, the music industry fights AIDS. Listen up, times are tough and you get a lot of things thrown your way. If you're being pressured to have sex and you're not ready, then say no. If you're having sex, be smart and use protection. Respect yourself and protect yourself.
For more information, call the National AIDS Hotline at 1-800-342-AIDS or log on to www.lifebeat.org.
Hello and welcome back to Eros Evolution. This is where we always explore the link between sex and spirit. And today I'm delving into my book that is going to be launched next month, and it's called From Princess to Queen. This would be my third book. What the structure of the book is about. And just before the break, I was delving into the parts about heartbreaks and my personal life. And that's something that I haven't written about, even though I've talked about it on my radio show, and also previous interviews. So this is the part about when is it appropriate as a sex educator, as a coach, to talk about your own personal life. It leaves you really vulnerable to judgment, and I really thought a lot.
Okay, I'm back. I'm sorry about the connection and the sound issues. I think there's a real problem with my connection with my microphone, and I can't really tell the problem because I can't hear myself. So anyway, I'm calling in using my phone now, so hopefully the sound is better. So I was just saying that I wanted to talk a bit about the chapter on Heartgasms. And it took me a long time, and I've shared this many times in this radio show, that it took me a long time to understand the link between sex and spirit. To me, sex was something, and sexuality was something that I was very interested in and wanted to help people in that area. And spirituality was something that I was always interested in, and I saw this as something important to support me in being a better person and to evolve and become more intuitive. And so I always saw the two as separate. And it really wasn't until I read the book Urban Tantra that I understood that sexual energy is a form of energy, and if meditation is energy, and how we feel and how we work on our spirituality is just energy, and sex is just part of this energy that we are working to manage. And so using the sex energy to open up your chakras, using your sex energy to send that intention to like a prayer. You're sending your sex energy to manifest your desires is called sex magic. And so when I started to understand this concept, in the link between sex and spirit became really clear. And this was when I started to also delve into learning about Tantra and learning how Tantra practices has everything to do with the intent. Sure, the practices carry, as they've been passed on through time, they contain power, just like rituals that people do. And so from understanding all these things, then understanding the link between this popular phrase that spiritual people say, which is where intention is, energy flows, a law of attraction, or the power of your thoughts. I begin to understand using my thoughts and my intention is everything to using my sexual energy to manifest or creating sex magic. The intention is really important. And when I first started, I didn't have confidence with myself. I didn't have confidence with what I was doing with my meditation or with my energy or with performing like rituals, and really didn't understand that through practice over time I became more confident. I stopped second guessing myself, and it really started by just doing little experiments with myself. For instance, I would self-pleasure or masturbate, and I would set the intention that this sexual energy be sent back to myself. So how am I going to know that my sexual energy, that I say, okay, send it to world peace, send it to global warming, send it to healing, send it to all the animals in suffering in the world? How would I know that this is really making an impact? So I thought, well, the most obvious thing is I should feel it for myself first. I should feel it, and I know if there is a difference when I masturbate and don't do anything with the energy, or when I masturbate and send the energy back to myself. What would that feel like? So it was through little experiments like this that I started to of course I felt a difference, and then from there I no longer had the doubt. And as I started to practice with small things and gain more confidence, then I didn't doubt myself anymore. And one of the things that has happened is, as I started to meditate, as I started to release negative emotions in my life, as I started to clear energy blocks in my body, I started to become more sensitive. I became more intuitive. I practiced honing my intuition, and over time, as I mentioned, started to doubt myself less and less, started to do less second guessing. And another thing that surprisingly to me started to happen was the way I experienced orgasm started to change. I started to have what I call undulation of the body as I have an orgasm. So my whole body would undulate, in a sense that the energy from the lower chakras, from my genitals, is trying to spread through my body. And as the energy is moving through my body would undulate, my body would shake or move in the form of like a wave. And the way I was having an orgasm was changing. And because I was becoming more sensitive and more intuitive and more open to energies inside me and also around me, I started to experience what was called Heartgasms. And Heartgasms it's just simply a term coined by my teacher, Urban Tantra. She coined this term Heartgasms, and essentially they are when you feel something in your heart, you allow them to expand, open up your heart. And some people experience skin shivers, when they pee. Some people experience an opening of not just their heart but their entire body when they look at the sunset or beautiful things in nature. And so that was what I was beginning to experience more as I allowed myself to become softer, as I allowed myself to surrender, as I allowed myself to become more vulnerable in allowing myself to experience all the different layers and blocks that I was putting up in my life. Because as a sensitive person, feeling overwhelmed was really common. And as I started to realize how I could process overwhelm, how I could do emotional release, how I could cope with stress, feeling that things are too much, as I started to have all these tools, and I let down my guard, as I let down all these walls, then I was able to feel more. And when I could feel more, I started to feel safe with allowing myself to feel more, and I started to cope better. And so Heartgasms became something that was tangible, that was something that was real, and something that I could experience more. And I'm sure for listeners out there, you can resonate with some of what I'm sharing, because there are people who can be cruel in our lives and can be mean because they are hurting. So yeah, we have a break now, and we'll come back and wrap up this show.
Bringing you the best of the conscious minds in the world. Om Times Radio, your conscious lifestyle on steroids. The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hi, this is Julie Geigel.
And I'm Susan Schuler.
And I'm Lori Walker.
And we are
the Psychic Angel Channelers
from Angel Talk Tuesday.
Tune in every week at 10 a.m. Eastern on OmTimesRadio.com.
The angels have heard your call and are here to help.
Are you ready to receive?
Bathe in the beautiful vibrational frequency to help you heal, expand, and remember your magnificence with Angel Talk Tuesday.
It's on us to stop sexual assault.
To get in the way before it happens.
To get a friend home safe.
And to not blame the victim.
It's on us.
To look out for each other.
To not look the other way.
It's on us to stand up.
To step in.
To take responsibility.
It's on us, all of us,
to stop sexual assault.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
And welcome back to the last part, the last 50 minutes of today's show, Eros Evolution. This is where we're talking about my new book called From Princess to Queen. And just before the break, I was talking about addressing the segment on Heartgasms. So the book has a lot more than that. It includes even things like why I became a sexologist, and why I feel sex communication is really important, and how someone can begin to become more comfortable with talking about sex. So there are lots of what I feel are useful, practical things that I have weaved into the book to make it more substantial for readers, which is actually my true intent. And then by putting myself out there, hoping to make the book much more personal, relatable, and much more where people can start start to understand that normalizing this, where the journey of becoming more sexually comfortable, confident, and empowered is ongoing, and that it's a progress, it's a progress for all of us. There's one particular chapter where I focus on sexual dysfunctions, because this is that particular chapter is not really a personal chapter. It was more an educational chapter. However, I felt it was really important to also weave in educational bits, as I mentioned. And so in that chapter called Sex Problems, I go into the different sexual dysfunctions and the definitions, because people get very confused. I was very confused about the difference between problems with ejaculation and with erection, and what early ejaculation meant and what delayed ejaculation means. And so if I was confused, then definitely other people would benefit from understanding more of these terms, because when you know what condition you have, then it's much easier for you to look it up, and it's also much easier for you to be able to articulate this with your helping professional that you go to, be it a sex therapist, a sexologist, a sex coach, be it a counselor, be it a psychologist or psychiatrist. It's really important, because then you feel much more empowered having the term as well. And this does come up also with my clients with vaginismus. So vaginismus is a condition where women, people with vaginas, have difficulties with penetration, and this can be due to pain that they have experienced. In my experience, is usually from fear of pain, and this may be different for different people, of course. So in the DSM guide, which is the definitive guide when it comes to mental health professionals, they refer to this guide because this guide is also used to be claimed against insurance for healthcare professionals in the US. So this is a very much used guide, which is shortened for Diagnostical Statistical Manual. It's a really not sexy name. And so it's been condensed to DSM guide. DSM-5 is the version right now. And so according to the DSM guide, what are the terms? So the book covers all these things. And then the subsequent compendium to that chapter talks about how you can begin to address sexual anxiety, which is really common. What happens is most sexual difficulties would come with some form of anxiety, and anxiety is really common, but how do we address it? So the book does go into that. Another thing that the book goes into is about long-term relationships, and I mentioned that the main chapter title is long-term relationships, but the chapter itself, where I talk about my personal insights, was called Not Happily Ever After. And it actually took me one day to condense everything that I've learned in the last 7 years into this 12 points of what I've learned about long-term relationships. So just very quickly, how in a couplehood, there is a tendency of one who has a preference for spontaneous sex and one who has a preference for planned sex. Spontaneous, as you know, you feel horny and then you want to have sex. These people actually feel not ready to be so quick, and they need preparation. They need to know what's happening. They need to know the program. So there's this personality difference when it comes to their preference. Then there are people who have more of a responsive sexual desire. So responsive sexual desire has to do with touch. When these people are touched, they can get turned on, and this is different for different people. Some people can only feel that more easily when they are being touched, being romanced. And so the book synthesizes everything that I've learned into like little paragraphs. Then there's also those people who have a tendency of preferring emotional sex versus physical sex. And as long as it's, they feel that it's physical, where it's lustful, or where it's kind of like what I describe as animal sex, they actually feel intimidated, they feel scared, they feel used, and that's the kind of headspace that couples find themselves in. So these are some of the differences. Another difference is in a couplehood, they would have generally like someone who's identifies as a morning person and someone who's more of a night person. And so a morning person would prefer to have sex in the morning, a night person would prefer to have sex at night. And this can cause a lot of challenges when it comes to when you actually have sex in a long-term relationship. Then there are those who are having what I call duty sex versus people who consider it's so important to be approaching sex as making love. People who have duty sex are tired, and they feel that sex is not really that important, and so when they do have sex, they do it out of a duty, they do it out of obligation, they do it to prevent a fight, or out of fears of their partner leaving them. However, when it comes to people who are into making love, they actually see the sex as creating more love in their relationship, as opposed to sex being the end all. And it's not really about the orgasms or taking from their partner. It's actually their belief of creating more love in their relationship. So this disparity, this difference between people who see sex as duty and people who see sex as making more love in the relationship causes conflict as well. Another thing that I see, there's so many. I'm not going to go into all of it because there's just too many. There's just so much. So I just there are actually 12 different points, and I've just summarized a few of the different things that I have actually synthesized, summarized into one paragraph each. So there are like 12 little paragraphs in that one chapter called Not Happily Ever After. And it's really, it took me like I don't know, like 1.5 days to condense everything that I have learned over the last 7 years into that one paragraph. So that was pretty interesting. What happens with princesses is they don't really have any duties or obligations. They just, a lot of princesses, they just when we think of princesses, we think of them just looking pretty and being willful and just doing what they want. And then what happens to princesses, when they grow up? And so I never thought about this. I just have the illusion of a princess, then meeting their prince and having a happily ever after. I never thought about what it means to be a queen. And this is a personal story. A friend of mine was actually asking me, what's the difference between a kingdom and a castle? So what is the difference for you? What's the difference between a kingdom and a castle? So a castle is basically a really big, you think of a castle, you think of a palace, and it's like a really big house. It's a big house. And what's the point of being a queen where you're just in charge of a house? Whereas a queen who actually rules a kingdom alongside her king, she has responsibilities, she has subjects under her, and she can be a good queen and she can be a bad queen. And in wanting to be a good queen, understanding that you're not just ruling a castle, you actually do have responsibilities, and your power can be used, it can be abused, and the amount of respect and the authority that you get, not just from being a queen, not just being given this title, the authority that you get comes from, and the respect that you get comes from how you use this power and how you reside over your subjects, and how you take responsibility first for yourself, for your emotions, and then how you are able to, from there, be able to extend this so as to do good and be of service of people. And so So when I started to understand what it really means to be a queen of a castle versus a queen of a kingdom, I started to really understand that, yeah, you know, I was a kid and I was just thinking about being a princess, and being a princess is overrated. Being a queen, however, really stepping into your adulthood. So understanding that, I was like, whoa, that really resonated with me. And I hope that this would resonate to all the little girls out there, little boys out there who fantasize about this prince, princess analogy. And I wanted to, I wanted to reach out to those people who like this little prince analogy, and then talking about growing and stepping into your power and authority as an adult. Yeah, so yeah, we're wrapping up today's show, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you liked it, please share it. And also, if you're interested to order a copy of my book, you can just drop me an email at drmarthalee@eroscoaching.com. So do check out my website, that's eroscoaching.com.